Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about South Donetsk direction. As you can see, we have additional icons and geolocations from this territory. In this video we can see the work of Ukrainian FPV drone operators, and as you can see, the Ukrainians were attacking and trying to destroy the Russian personnel carrier that was abandoned by the Russians along the tree line that is heading towards the road 0524. We are using these geolocations just to confirm once again that the Russians captured this territory and basically managed to physically cut the main supply road between Ugledar and Konstantinovka. As for Konstantinovka, the Russians continue artillery preparation, continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainian forces in the vicinity of the bridge between Konstantinovka itself and the residential area to the north of the city. Most likely, as we discussed in the previous updates, the Russians are about to begin offensive operation towards this area, trying to cut the Konstantinovka from the north and to establish complete fire control from one bank of the river to another. Now let's move further. We have interesting report from Krasnogorovka itself. The Russian sources on the ground are saying that the Russians managed to establish complete fire control over the main supply road that goes from the west to the stronghold itself. So Russians established fire control over Sidova Street, and that Ukrainians suffer significant losses and about to be encircled. About the encirclement, more and more interesting updates are coming from the western Avdiivka or Pokrovsk direction. We have a lot of very interesting details, so let's start. About Novosilovka Persha. According to pro-Ukrainian mappers, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, as a result of attacks during the previous 24 hours, managed to improve their positions inside of the village and capture the first buildings of the farms inside of this territory. So, as we can see, according to this information, there are still Ukrainians in the area, but the Ukrainians are about to fall back completely, and most likely within a day or two, the village will be captured and secured by the Russians. Now, let's talk about progress. We have very interesting report. If you remember, during the previous few days, lots of mappers have already adjusted their maps showing this territory between Lozovatsk and Progress itself, these fields, and the complete Russian control. But today we got additional details from pro-Ukrainian sources about the situation on this ground. According to pro-Ukrainians, the armed forces of Russian Federation are trying to surround a part of the defense forces group near Progress. There is no order to withdraw. We were contacted by the fighters of the 1st and 3rd battalions of 31st Mechanized Brigade, who have been defending the encirclement for the last few days. To the south of Lozovatsk, the armed forces of Russian Federation formed a neck through which a number of positions west of the height of 236.9 have been held. Now the Russians use the tactics of wandering gifts, whose task is to get as close as possible to Ivanovka. Fighters of the 31st Brigade report the risks of possible consequences to the battalion leadership. The latter support them, but the brigade leadership wants the fighters to continue to sit in the circle to the last soldier. Company management is practically absent because their commanders are wounded or killed. So this is the situation. Once again, summarizing everything, currently the Russians control something like this, and they created just a small neck, just a small road or passage that Ukrainians can use for evacuation. But obviously this is not the road of evacuation. This is just the trap for the Ukrainians who decide to fall back, because if the Ukrainians start using this road for evacuation, obviously they would be destroyed by the Russians. So this is the cauldron. Once again, there are just two battalions. There are just maybe not even battalions. There might be some soldiers or forces from these battalions, but as I understand, according to information we have, there are around maybe up to 1 or even 200 soldiers of armed forces of Ukrainian 31st Battalion who was blocked by the Russians in this area. Furthermore, according to the same post, as you can see, the Russians are using the tactics of wandering gifts, whose task is to get as close as possible to Ivanovka. What does it mean? The Russians in this stage of the special military operation start using massively the type of forces like DRG, diverse and reconnaissance groups. And if if the line of combat contact that you can see right now in front of your screen means the control by the regular armies, we don't know for sure, nobody knows for sure where exactly we can find the Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups. But according to this post, currently the Edge Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group are already operating in the vicinity of Ivanovka, trying to destroy to discover, to destroy, to track, to stop, to slow down the Ukrainians exactly in this direction. So this, by the way, this is not the only area where the Russians are using sabotage groups so massive. We will discuss this in the next part of the video. So this is the current situation, and if the Russians have already reached the outskirts of Ivanovka, that means that the situation for the Ukrainians is even worse than we've been discussing and describing in the previous videos. We receive additional updates about the Russian progress in the vicinity of Vovcha. Just yesterday we were talking that the first Russian groups entered Vovcha and there was very heavy clashes with the Ukrainian forces, but most likely we were talking about the same reconnaissance and sabotage groups that have already entered the village and began fighting with those Ukrainians who were there, while the main Russian forces, while the main Russian regular army tried to improve their positions behind the sabotage groups, while their forces are moving towards the village itself. So according to information we have, according to different mappers, including pro-Ukrainians, the Russians during the previous 24 hours first entered the village, and on the other side the Russians managed to capture the fields, fortifications and tree lines also towards the same village. So most likely today we're going to receive first updates and first clashes between the regular Russian army and Ukrainian regular army inside of the village. Meanwhile, the sabotage and reconnaissance group of armed forces of Russian Federation will move even further in the western direction towards the village of Veselye and Zhelene. So this is new tactics that the Russians began using. This sabotage and reconnaissance group are very powerful. As I understand, during the previous months the Russians been training these groups in Sumy area, and we remember a lot of talks about sabotage groups, and now this very powerful experienced group were stretched between different brigades and different battalions all over the line of combat contact, and basically based and with the help of these groups the Russians managed to achieve significant progress during the previous few months. Now let's move further. As for New York-Donetsk agglomeration, we haven't received anything in special, just regular videos of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian forces inside of the stronghold, inside of the different parts of this agglomeration. Nothing special, just confirm the line of combat contact and additional, let's say, attempts from the Russian side to improve their positions and to move further with the purpose to capture Chasiv Yar and with the capture Donetsk New York agglomeration completely. So nothing special, just a regular military activity. Now let's move further. Let's talk about Klishchiivka direction, and this is another video that confirms the perfect, let's call it like this, perfect and even maybe super professional work of Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group. Once again, according to information we have, the Russians just captured Klishchiivka and they haven't even managed to secure Klishchiivka completely. There are still positions that considered as the area under Ukraine control. Who knows what exactly is happening today, because the last update about the village we received a long time ago. And today the Russian sources published the video how another sabotage and reconnaissance group of armed forces of Russian Federation ambushed the Ukrainian soldiers along this road and attacked them, and as a result of attack the Ukrainians lost 3 soldiers. The Russians have just 1 wounded. So the Russians hide it in the brushes, in the small brushes in this area, and as a result of machine gun fire the Ukrainian soldier was wounded and probably lost his life. So summarizing everything, the Russian sabotage group, at least on Klishchiivka direction, is already operating on this line, and the sources are saying that the Ukrainians currently don't have 100% control even over this territory, because the Ukrainian soldiers refuse to take positions in these fortifications due to significant losses and very professional work of Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group. Now let's move further. Let's talk about Kupinsk direction, and we have the same story in this area as well. According to information we have, the first Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group have already entered and start clashes for the road R79 between Kruglyakivka and Kolesnikovka. Furthermore, during Russian control by the groups, by diverse groups, this area, the main Russian forces are moving further, very slowly, step by step, but the Russians are moving. And according to information we have, according to different mappers, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly inside of Peshchane itself. The pro-Ukrainian mappers consider that this territory still, let's say, part of this territory still in the gray zone, so the Russians captured few more streets, few more buildings by them. And according to different pro-Russian sources, the edge Russian positions can be discovered, can be spotted already along this line. But once again, I believe that as for this line, probably the Russian sources are talking about the edge positions of edge area that the Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group managed to reach as a result of diverse operations in this direction. So obviously significant progress. Of course, it's not artillery, it's not Iskander, but it's already some fire, certain control. The Ukrainians most likely suffer big problems with supply and support, and this is exactly the direction and the road so that the Russians are planning to use for further offensive to cut this area in two pieces. Now let's move further. Let's talk about northern Kharkiv direction. First, let's talk about Vovchansk. As for Vovchansk itself, south and northern, during the previous night, we haven't received anything important. It seems that the sides decided to change their focus because the situation here can't be resolved by neither by the Russians nor the Ukrainians, and now the main focus, both sides moved to the forest and to Seversky Donetsk Donbass River, to the villages like Burgovatka, Prilipka, and Staritsa. The Russians began artillery preparation of another foothold, of another positions of armed forces of Ukraine, and most likely during the next few days the Russians will try to cross Seversky Donetsk River and to establish additional foothold to the west of the city of Volchansk. So we are talking about this territory, and most likely soon we're going to receive the first videos, the first geolocations of Russian presence exactly in this area. Now let's move further to Staritsa. As you can see, according to the geolocations and according to different mappers, the Ukrainians managed to significantly increase their foothold and territory under their control in the village of Staritsa itself and in the outskirts of the same village. So the Ukrainians are attacking, they're moving, they are forcing the Russians to fall back. The Russians need to do something with this. If they are not going to stabilize the situation, then the Ukrainians will be able to restore control over Staritsa, then the Ukrainians will be able to restore control over Bugrovatka, and the Russians can say goodbye to their foothold on the Seversky Donetsk, on the Ukrainian side of Seversky Donetsk River. So as for these changes on the map, these changes were made by different reliable mappers, yet without any geolocations that can confirm this. As for this progress on the ground, the Russian sources published the video of how they were bombing the buildings and structures inside of Staritsa, and one of the buildings was geolocated exactly in this area, and based on this video we have adjusted the map and we have added additional territory under complete Ukrainian control. So there are very heavy offensive from the Ukrainian side and there are very heavy clashes. Let's wait what is going to be next. Now let's talk about Gluboka. After several attempts to attack and to restore control over Gluboka, the Ukrainians were completely defeated. The forces of 92nd, 30th Brigades lost their combat capabilities, and the Ukrainians decided to withdraw their positions completely. According to different Russian sources, the second day in a row, the Russians are saying about complete clearing and complete securing of this territory, and Glubokov by the 24th of July was once again recaptured by the Russians. Still, we haven't received any geolocations confirming this, but probably we're going to receive them very soon. Another FAB 3000 arrived in the Liptsi. According to information we have and according to the group of forces north, the Russians most likely were bombing the forces and the temporary positions of 30th Brigade or the forces and positions of 92nd Assault Brigade. As a result of attack, the Ukrainians suffered significant losses, yet we don't know the exact numbers, but this is one of the reasons why the Ukrainians decided to stop any attempts to capture Gluboka. Now let's talk about political events. We have a lot of very interesting details. First of all, according to the latest poll that was conducted in the Ukraine, 32% of the population of Ukraine is ready to give up territories to end the conflict during the special military operation. I'll remind you that when the special military operation started, there were just 10% of population who was ready to give up territory in exchange for peace. Now it's already 32. So significant growth, as you can see. Maybe this is another media activity from the Ukrainian side trying to prepare the society before the end of the special military operation and before the situation that the Ukrainians will be forced to give up significant territories to Russia. Another important statement about the mobilization. The military experts analyzed the situation with Ukrainian reserves, forces and population, and they made the conclusion that the new wave of mobilization in Ukraine will cause significant damage to the country's economy as it will worsen the labor shortage. The Washington Post reports. The newspaper notes that there are now more vacancies in the country than there are applicants, which force employees to increase salaries. Otherwise, enterprises will not be able to withstand the competition and risk closing. But the Ukrainians have some solution for this. At least they have another 150,000 reserves, and we are talking about the prisoners. Currently, this mobilization situation is in a test period. At least 3,800 Ukrainians, 3,800 Ukrainian prisoners serve in the armed forces of Ukraine. Most of them are completing military training and will soon go to the front. So they will test them, and if the experience is successful, obviously the Ukrainians will mobilize mobilize as many as possible soldiers from prison. Furthermore, we got additional report that Ukraine is ready to negotiate with the Russian side. Kuleba said, the Minister of the Foreign Affairs, in a conversation with the head of the Chinese Foreign Minister. I reminded that just yesterday this minister entered China. His visit will be continued till the 26th of July. It's a full-scale negotiation process, obviously, and where China will provide Ukraine details about peace agreement and Russian demands and how this is going to be resolved. And but don't wait to applause or something like this, because if you expect that Ukraine will sign peace agreement with Russia, first of all we need to discuss another interesting situation that took place in Moscow. This morning the Ukrainians conducted a terrorist attack on the Russian highly ranked officer, vice commander of the radio connection and satellite connection, which is very important strategical forces of armed forces of Russian Federation, was attacked in his own street in front of his own house. The bomb was established under his car, and when he entered the car and started the engine, the car there was a very heavy explosion, and according as I understand, currently this person maybe is wounded, maybe he's in the hospital, but most likely he will not be able to survive. So while the Minister of Foreign Affairs conducting negotiation process in China about the peace plan, on the other hand we see that the special forces of Ukraine conducted another terrorist attack in Moscow, which means that there are still forces in Ukraine who is planning and who is going to continue special military operation fight with Russia. And regarding the losses, regarding and despite complete absence of support from the United States of America. And this is a very big problem for Zelensky, because he still hasn't found a solution how to resolve it. On the other hand, we continue receiving more and more videos of how the Ukrainians conducting military exercises with F-16s above the territory of Brussels, France, which also confirms that nobody is going to start any negotiation process until at least we see F-16s in battle, in combat. So all these games conducted by Zelensky is just games, nothing more. We see that the actions and the reality show us that the special military operation is going to continue. And about the Washington, more and more updates about the balagan that is happening there. The United States Secretary of Service Director Kimberly Chittle has resigned after his failure with the protection of former President of the United States of America, Donald Trump. Also, we have report that some Tennessee Republican Congressman Andy Ogles introduced a bill to impeach Kamala Harris as vice president, which is also very important. And we see that the situation is getting worse and worse. The battle between Democrats and Republicans is going to be very heavy, very fierce clashes, probably as we used to see in somewhere in Bakhmut, and maybe there are going to be even more losses between the Republicans and Democrats, that the Ukrainians suffered losses during the battle for Avdiivka, something like this. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.